Hello, welcome to the Minimalist EDC. My name's Chris, and today we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance on this guy right here. This is the Vero Engineering Synapse Mini. And so I've had this guy for about a week of light use, and you can check out my unboxing video for some first impressions. So, one weekend and a few problems. And I think they can be resolved by doing just a little bit of maintenance on it, but let me show you what I mean. So first off, we have it's become uncentered. Also, it's become loose in the pivot, so you can see it got a little jiggle and wiggle, and you can probably even hear that. So what that means is when the blade is actually open, you end up getting a little back and forth blade play. No front to back, but back and forth for sure. And so we definitely want to get that taken care of. So I'm going to take it apart. We're going to service it and put it back together, and hopefully we'll be back to golden once we get there. So I believe everything on this guy is a T8, so I have that prepared. And as with all my disassembly videos, they're almost always live. First time I'm in the knife, so you can learn from my mistakes and we'll get through this together. So what I see here is I got two body screws here. I got a body screw here and a pivot screw. And typically there's another body screw right here underneath the clip, but there isn't, and so I'm guessing the clip is held in by this guy right here. So what I'm going to do, start with, is see if I can get that clip off by taking this body screw out. Pretty easy. I don't feel any presence of Loctite or anything. It being a very long screw, I think my suspicion has been confirmed. Let's get this scale off. And so I'm going to keep the scale with the screws that came with it in one place. And what we see here is we got a flat slab of titanium. There's no milling on this side. Once we get it open, we can take a look, but I don't believe there's any milling on the inside either. But we have two more screws that have been exposed, and that's going to be the ones that hold in the back spacer here. So, and let's see, this guy doesn't seem to want to come out with just that one screw. So let's keep going. We'll get this body screw out. I'm wondering if there's some sort of, I have to take this thing fully apart with the back spacer. Well, let's try. All right, so let's get that guy out and this guy out. Okay, that's what released the pocket clip. Okay, so the pocket clip has two screws. One is going to come through the entire knife, which is this guy right here, and the other one is going to come through the backspace, through the liner, the backspace, or the other liner, and the scale. And that's this guy right here. And so let's take a look. Yeah, they are different size screws, so we do not want to get them mixed up. I'll put that guy right there. And since I don't think I've never taken this guy apart, so let's take it fully apart. Got that one there. I'll just keep the screws that came out of it together. Next thing I'm going to do is get, let's see, this guy out. A little tight, but not too bad. I think that is a duplicate of this screw. Yep, so they can hang out together. So what we have now at this point in time is just the locking mechanism without the scales on it. There's a little bit of milling right here. I think that's just a relief for the lock bar. And nothing else going on. It's just flat titanium. Just a lot of titanium. Okay, so let's get the pivot out. Feels like we have a captured pivot, which is good. Comes out pretty easily. Yep, there's a little gunk in there. It's probably just the factory grease that's kind of gunked up. A lot of times the factory grease, even on high-end knives, is not the best grease, so it'll gunk up after a little bit of time. And now I'm just going to kind of wiggle these parts apart. I'm sure there's a pin or something. All right. Yep, there's a barrel spacer that just fell out. I'll get to that in a second. I just want to make sure that I get this apparatus completely done. And this is just a little wedge tool that I use to get in there and not break anything or mar anything up. Doesn't want to let go just yet. Okay, so we got the back spacer out completely. So I'm just going to kind of work this and see what's going on. Maybe if I disengage the blade. Nope, still doesn't want to come. I'm not feeling any locking mechanism or anything. I think it's just, it's put together very tight is the problem. And so in that case, generally just working it back and forth. Yep, there we go. Work it back and forth until things just come apart. So don't lose any in your parts. We have a few things going on here. We have, this is the bearing racer where the bearings actually go on, and it's going to go in that little divot right there. We have the blade itself. We'll get to that in a second. And then we have another bearing racer here in the scale and a bearing. So taking a look at this guy all apart. I'll put that back in there for safekeeping. This is kind of a Vero Synapse Mini all taken apart. This is what you get. And so I don't see anything like exceptionally intriguing in the middle of this. I don't see any mechanisms or any milling that are just like, I want to call this out and talk about it. It all looks pretty standard. Everything is pretty thin and slim. The knife itself is fairly lightweight. I think what was holding it together was this little pin right here. Let's see if I can pull this up. Yeah, see that little pin right here? It fits into this little hole right here, and it was just tight fitting. So let's begin. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the pivot out completely. Set that aside. I'm going to get the bearing out, or the bearing racer out. And they're not in there by any real means, just the force of friction of the oil that's on the surface. And all I want to do is clean that out and put in fresh grease. So what I normally use is just very cheap rubbing alcohol. We're just going to clean everything up. So we can do a little bit of alcohol on our pad, and it doesn't take much. All we're doing is just one or two passes along, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of gunk come off this guy anyway. And then we're going to get down in there where, let's see if I can show you. There is like a little bit of gunk and grease. It's not terrible, but we are going to clean it out. And honestly, like, my fingers are kind of fat, so let's just use a Q-tip. Same thing. Get it wet with some rubbing alcohol, and then just get in there and get out any gunk and grease. And then I'm just going to clean this post as well. Next, we'll go to this scale, or liner, or whatever you want to call it. I can see I'm getting some crud out of there, and then I'm just going to clean the lock bar as well. And then the blade itself. So all I'm going to do is just go around the edge of where the bearings and the bearing racer is, and then this is the detent ball track. So this is kind of nice right here. There's a couple neat things going on in the blade, and so let me see if I can get this to focus right. So you have where the detent ball hole where the detent ball rests, and then you can see the track there where it runs along the blade tank. And then we also have a detent ball ramp. I am a huge fan of detent ball ramps. They make a much smoother action, and they just basically give it a little bit of, instead of having to jump all the way up onto this surface, it gives it the detent ball a place to glide up there, and you end up with a much smoother transition when you open and close the knife. All right, so next we are going to get these bearings cleaned. Truth be told, I think just a little bit of tightening could have solved the majority of the issues, but there was also it felt like metal on metal grinding, kind of like, not bad, but like in a way where I could tell that the bearings weren't working optimally when I was opening and closing the knife. So this is, even when I have a perfectly working knife, I will take it apart usually within the first week because A, I want to see how it works, and B, I want to make sure that it's working the way I want to. All right, so we got most of everything done. I want to do a little bit better job here. Yeah. And get this dry. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to start our reassembly operation. So, sorry, I just saw this little backspacer. Wanted to make sure it doesn't roll away. I was going to put it back in its little home. There. Okay. Because these little backspacer barrels actually have the threads for our screws, so we want to make sure that they are safe. Okay. Starting reassembly. Let's take a look at what we got here. So this is the lock side, and you can see that we have a D-shaped pivot, which is phenomenal. This is a captured pivot, which means the pivot can go only in one way. So once we take our pivot, we're going to get it in there. Oh, okay. One thing I'm seeing here, the pivot is on one directional. So that D-shaped ring or D-shaped area is only on one side of it. So a lot of times they will have the whole thing shaved down all the way to this side, so that you can put it in pretty much any way you want. But this one will not allow that. So I have to go from this side, and then the pivot has to be facing, as you see. Pivot has to be facing down, or the D shape has to be facing down, so when I eventually lock up this knife, that it will fit. And so that may cause a little bit of a problem when we get there. Usually a little wiggling and jiggling, get it where we want it to go. So next, I'm going to just put a little bit of grease, not a whole lot, on this side of where the bearing racer goes, and then we are going to stack the bearing racer in there. And put a little bit more in there, and then I'm going to put the bearing on, and then put a little bit more. And like I say, I use more grease than is probably necessary, but in the course of the few hours, oh my goodness, I'm doing this with bad focus, I apologize. In the course of a few hours, that grease is going to work itself out onto the blade, and I'll just wipe it off. It'll be good to go, and I'll have plenty of grease. Next, we are going to get the blade in there. So, place that guy down. Don't like that sound, but it is what it is. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of lubrication in the detent ball hole and kind of just drag it along the trail there. Next, I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 drops into the bearing racers, or the bearings. Get that on there. All right, the next is going to be the bearing racer in this side. So since I'm going to be placing this down, a little bit of lubrication in there forms a little bit of surface tension and allows us to hold that in place where it's not going to fall out on us. And then I'm just going to put just a smattering in there. But before I can lock this up, I'm going to have to get our backspacer in its place. And these little parts always kind of fly around. Okay. That's upside down. Of course it is. All right. Struggling a little bit to get these to go where I want them. Okay. I think that is in place. Perfect. So lastly, we will get this guy on top. And the most important thing is to get that D-shaped ring to line up correctly with the scale. I'm not there yet. So I guess as I was putting on the blade, it rotated, so I'm going to rotate the blade out just a little bit because that's the easiest way to get this to point in the right direction for me at the moment. think I got it. Yep. And just to pin this all together while I work on the rest of it, we're going to get the pivot in. Something doesn't feel right. Back it out. If you get any resistance, just start backing it out until you actually hit the threads, because worst thing you want to do is cross thread a pivot screw, because that's just going to ruin the whole thing. Okay, perfect. Next thing I want to do is, before I put these scales back on, a little bit of a maintenance step that I wanted to take on them. So let me get everything set aside. So this is clip side on the left, show side on the right. You see how these are, well, let me get them a little closer maybe. The micarta on them is raw, it's a little dusty looking, and that's by design. That's the way that they're intended to look. They are natural micarta, and they are a little papery, rough on the edges. So what I'm going to do is, in my opinion, make these things look a little bit better. So what I have here is some mineral oil. And this is just the same mineral oil I use to oil my butcher block and my cutting boards. So it makes a little bit of a difference. And like, to put some mineral oil on this guy, like, I'm not using much, I'm just brushing it, and then I'm going to actually dry it off here in a second. And then I'll put some on just a little bit on the back as well, just to, it'll absorb in, and it helps in some ways protect it, like, especially if you're using this in wet environments. The mineral oil does the same thing as with your butcher block, where it'll soak in a little bit. And this is absolutely not something you need to do, nor am I advising to do it. I do it because I like the way it looks. I like the way what it does to the texture and what it does to the feel. And so let's take a look at what I've done here. So with just a little bit of mineral oil, and it's not permanent. Like, this stuff will absorb in and dry out, and it's something you do have to do to it. It's like oiling leather. But you see the stark difference in what I've ended up with here. So I'm going to do it to the other one as well. All I'm doing is just putting a light layer. And these things, I mean, it is essentially an organic material, because micarta is just, for all intents and purposes, like fabric with resin that holds it together, that keeps its shape and its rigidity. And so, yeah. And then I'm gonna grab a fresh paper towel and just get any residual oil that may be on the surface that hasn't absorbed already. This is a really quick process, and you can do this to any of your micarta. It's going to change its appearance. It's just going to darken it up, and like I said, it is not permanent. It will eventually dry out. If you decided, hey, I don't like this, you can just like leave it in a dry area and it will make its way out. But I end up with two much darker scales. So put that away. And so the show side clip, I can get that in there. I think that is going to have to go in last, but that'll keep the scale in, at least for right now. And the next thing I need to do is figure out which screws go where on this side. Actually, I think I messed up. If you were watching me take this apart, you're probably yelling at your computer right now, because there is one that has to go on this side too, right? So I believe it's that one right there. It's not catching. My fingers are a little greasy after dealing with mineral oil. There we go. So perhaps it was this one. No, because it can't. It has to sit flush. There we go. That's that one. It has to be. Nope, not catching there either. Maybe I'm just not hitting the barrel the way I needed to. Again, like I said, I've not done this before. I'm doing it blind, so. Maybe I got the wrong screw. I think I got the wrong screw. Yeah, it's one of these two. It's one of those two. The question is which. Once I saw all these screws in here, I really should have taken a picture just to see, because this one there's really only one way that, like, that's just a pass through, right? All right. I really think that this was the one I needed. There it goes. Okay. Maybe I just didn't have the things threaded correctly the first time. Now that it is in place. Yep, there we go. Perfect. You know, I thought I was lost. All right. So that's the clip side. It's going to have one of these long guys go through it like that. I'm just trying to see what depth these things go through. So this is definitely the one that goes in through here, goes into the pocket clip. There we are. We found the orientation. So we'll grab our pocket clip. Get it flush and squared. I think that's going to have to go through the scale. Yep. Avoid one more mistake. So now the pocket clip is locked on. We are on to the scale next. So that's going to go here. And then this will go through here. And lastly, we'll get here. But we're not done yet, because we still got to see how our action is. And maybe I should have done that prior to putting this whole thing back together. I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Do you put it back together before you check the action? A lot of times I don't, because it's just going to be micro adjustments at that point. Okay, so looking at the action, what do we got? Pretty centered. Not too bad. Flicks out. Flicks out. Not too bad. Side to side is completely gone. That's good. Yeah, I think I did what I set out to do here. So we got a mini Vero Synapse. One interesting thing, if you want to rewind to the beginning of this video and watch the how the scales looked in this orientation as compared to now, and see what difference the little bit of mineral oil makes, you can kind of get an idea of what we're dealing with that type of process. But yeah, I appreciate a like and subscribe. Thank you guys for hanging out with me while I work on this, and hope you have a great day. All right, y'all take care. Bye.